All right, guys, we are going to get rocking and rolling tonight as we have some more attendees join us. So I just want to say thank you for everyone joining us tonight. We'll be streaming live to Facebook as well as recording this so that we can share it out with anyone who is unavailable to meet with us tonight. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. We're in Zoom webinar, which means that our attendees tonight, you're automatically muted. Your camera's not on, so you don't have to worry about any of those distractions. You can use both the chat feature and the Q&A feature. I really suggest to use the chat feature to have casual conversation. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We were having an invigorating conversation before we started about weather. I am down in Florida. We have some people that are snowed in and experiencing that. So feel free to have some casual conversation in the chat. We really want to utilize that Q&A section for folks that may have questions for Geoff that we can cover during our Q&A portion at the end of the event. So feel free to pop anything in there and we'll cover that with him at that point in time. If you have any technical difficulties, feel free to message either myself or Amy and we can handle those. So without further ado, I am going to get started with a brief introduction for Geoff, and then I'm going to pass over the mic to him. So Geoff is a 1980 initiate of the Triangle chapter at the University of Michigan, where he received his Bachelor of Science in Computer and Communication Sciences.
Let's see who's all on the call.
Sorry about that. In addition, Geoff also holds certifications as an associate certified coach by the International Coaching Federation, and he also holds certificates from the Kansas Leadership Center, which focuses on leadership coaching. Geoff has held numerous professional roles at varying companies throughout the years. A few of those roles include employment at Microsoft as a senior tools strategist, roles at Google, serving as a senior engineering manager, as well as a senior release engineer, and at Pandora as a production engineering manager and a director of software engineering. Since 2019, Geoff has been focused on growing his own company as a leadership coach and leadership development facilitator with Geoff Mendal Consulting. Through this work, Geoff brings leadership and development skills to the tech industry to help individuals in leadership roles mobilize change in their organization. Whether leaders find themselves feeling stuck, struggling to find their purpose, or may find it difficult to balance everything that life throws their way, Geoff provides tactics to overcome these difficulties through one-on-one coaching. Geoff also provides company-wide assistance on short and long-term projects. Geoff is located in the Bay Area, and I thank him for supporting Triangle through speaking on this very timely and important topic to so many of our members. So without further ado, Geoff, I'm going to pass it over to you and let you share your screen and do your thing.
All right. Thank you very much, Carrie, Amy, everybody. Nice to be with you all here tonight. Just something of note, if you're typing to me in the chat and I'm not responding to you now, it's because I literally am not going to be able to see it once I share the screen. My old Windows computer here doesn't do Zoom very well. So projecting the slides, yes. Slides plus chat, no. So I'm not ignoring you, but we will have Q&A afterwards. So we'll be able to catch up then. So let's see here. Get going. Hopefully everybody can see the header slide here. All okay?
It does look like we're good.
All right. So hopefully you are here to learn how to be a better leader and communicate better as a tech leader in our post-pandemic world. I promise we'll get to that. In order to get to that, though, I need to set the stage and give some context. There are various words that are used, leadership being the prime example, that mean different things to different people. And what I want to do is kind of set the stage with the terminology so that I can make the case for how you can exercise leadership better. So let's start with authority. And here we have a picture of a silverback gorilla. And the story of the silverback gorilla has a lot to do with authority. He's called the silverback gorilla because he literally has a silver back. He's an elder. He's been around, he knows things, he's been vetted. He is, we would say, the leader of his band. He's entrusted to protect that band with his knowledge and experience. They're under his care. He knows how to deal with threats through his years of experience, how to recognize things, and to protect the band from any kind of threat. So clearly the silverback is an authority. Now, authority in general, not just for the silverback, but in any kind of context, is nothing more than an exchange of power that's granted for three different things: service, protection, direction, protection, direction, and order. Those are the three services that authority is granted. The same is true in our modern organizations. If you're an authority in a community, in a family, in any kind of tech organization, government, it doesn't matter. If you got that authority through an election, through an appointment, through inheritance, it's all the same. You were granted that power in exchange for protection, direction, and order of the people you have authority over. And as such, you're expected to know how to make progress on challenges. People are looking up to you to make progress. But what happens when those challenges aren't in your or the organization's wheelhouse? How should you as an authority, or in this case, a silverback, deploy yourself when operating outside your expertise or competency? So consider this band of gorilla that's threatened by leopards. Leopards are the natural enemy of gorillas. And through many, many millennia, the gorillas have learned that if they form a tight circle under the leadership of the silverback will essentially signal them to form a very tight circle, that the leopards won't have as successful an attack or an attack at all, because it won't be easy to pick off a weak gorilla. That is how they respond to the threat. They form a very tight circle. The silverback learned that and knows how to use that technique to fight off that threat. But what if instead of the threat of a leopard, that the threat is something or someone else? What if it's a group of poachers with guns, rifles? If all the silverback has learned how to do in his life is to form a tight circle, to signal, get in a tight circle, guys, then that will be exactly the wrong thing to do. It'll make it very, very easy for that threat to essentially kill them all off. So when facing a new threat, it's never been foreseen, or it's not in the wheelhouse, there's no real competency in the organization to handle it, what should an authority do? And as we'll see as we get further into this, if all the authorities know how to do is one very well-honed move, one thing they practice that they're very, very good at, when it's a new threat, because, hey, it worked on the old one, why won't it work on this one? They may not fare well. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, COVID-19, no one's seen that before. What do we do in that case? And we're certainly going to discuss that. So the next thing I want to talk about is leadership. And here I'm defining leadership perhaps a little bit differently than you've heard it before. Leadership is the way I'm defining it and distinguishing it from authority is really an activity. It's not a person. It's not a position. Leadership can be practiced by anyone at any time in any kind of organization or community. Leadership is challenging the status quo, going up against the status quo. As such, it's a very risky activity to undertake. The purpose of leadership is to engage others, making progress on daunting challenges. And an admonition here, and an important one: never, ever, ever practice leadership alone. The reason for that will become clear in a second. So you can see that there's a distinction here between leadership and management, or authority, as I defined it on the previous slide. And that's purposeful. They are different. But let's compare the two. If leadership is an activity calling out something, policies, procedures, traditions, norms, where there's unproductive work going on, and you're attempting to mobilize an organization to be more productive by perturbing the status quo, then that's probably not something that needs to be done all the time. It's only as necessary. In fact, hopefully a very minimal amount of time is leadership ever needed. Now, distinguish that from management, where management is about keeping things under control, keeping things the same, making people feel comfortable, establishing norms. So if the office looks the same on Monday when I arrive as when I last left it on Friday, that's a good thing. I'll maintain trust. But if things are vastly different, if all the cheese is moved around or the chairs are moved around, I'm going to be a little bit uncomfortable and perturbed, and I might not be excelling at my best. Another example in politics, a cynical view might be that the top motivation of a politician or any elected leader really is to keep their office. That's job one. Just keep getting reelected, stay in office. That is their job, or at least that's how they seem to act. And less so with actually solving intractable problems for the country, the state, the town, the community, whatever their purview. So their behavior is not likely to push against the status quo. In fact, quite the opposite. They're probably going to stroke the status quo, not perturb the status quo, even though perturbing it is exactly what we need to make progress on challenges. So this is kind of a thorny wicket, huh? How do we make progress when authorities may not have the motivation to do so for their own self-protection, but if we don't do it, we're kind of stuck. So that is tough. And in fact, the higher one gets in an organization, the more prominent the position, as you go from manager to director to VP to CTO, et cetera, the harder it is to exercise leadership. Why? It's because of all the competing commitments that one might have, and the expectations that those under you or who look up to you may have. And maintaining expectations is important if people want to keep their job. People get ostracized from exercising leadership when they're in a role of authority, especially when they practice it alone. It's easy for the status quo or the system to just push them aside, to, I hate to use this word, to cancel them out. Cancel culture. Very, very easy if done one at a time. But if a dozen show up at once, then it's much, much more difficult to ignore or curtail. So leadership done well is actually not about putting on a cape and acting like some superhuman being. It's about mobilizing others to do very difficult work. It's dancing on the edge of one's own authority. So another thing we need to do is to distinguish the type of work that we're talking about. When we're exercising leadership, if the work is technical or the work is adaptive, then it requires very, very different approaches for leadership. I'll be making a more detailed case here. This is just an overview from the Kansas Leadership Center. where sometimes I facilitate leadership courses and hopefully someday do some coaching work. If we're dealing with a technical problem, which for this audience would probably be most of the time, the problem is usually clear, or with some investigative work will be clear. An adaptive problem, as we're going to soon learn, actually requires learning. It's murky. There may not even be agreement on what the problem is. So the solution on technical would also be clear, and the opposite with adaptive. It still requires learning. How can we solve something if we don't even know what the problem is or agree on what the problem is? It also matters whose work is it to solve. With technical work, we have experts or authorities solve it for us. For adaptive work, we're trying to find stakeholders to do the work. The type of work is we try to be efficient when we're doing technical work, get it done as quickly as possible and hopefully with high quality. With adaptive work, because we may not have the expertise necessary, we have to actually experiment and try things that may fail or likely will fail, and we'll learn from that failure. Usually with technical work, we want it done as soon as possible. For adaptive work, it's going to take a while, and that's frustrating. People want answers to all kinds of work immediately, and unfortunately, we're going to have to disappoint them with adaptive work. It takes a long time to get there. The expectations of people who are ordering this work to be done are that it solves a problem. But in adaptive work, it's about making progress. And again, if you're not with me, just stick with me for a little bit. It's going to be very clear in the next couple of slides. The attitude towards technical work should be one of confidence and skill. I remember when I was in college, that's what it was all about, get my skills up and my training, my education on the industry so that I could be minimally competent when I went out there and continue to do so with increasing degrees of competence and skill. Adaptive work requires a different mentality. We actually have to be curious about things. So let's get into two examples. And these examples will make clear the difference between technical work and adaptive work. So consider brakes that are squeaky. This I would call technical work. Though, as you'll see, I'm going to say I was wrong in a little bit. But for now, let's consider that this is technical work. We have squeaky brakes. What do we do? Generally, what we do is we take it to an auto mechanic who has some knowledge and skill about diagnosing the problem, has seen this 1,000 times before, knows how to remove the lug nuts in the proper order, and knows how to look at the rotors and the whatever else. You can tell I don't know how to fix brakes anymore. I'm not an expert, but I know to go to one who is. They will diagnose it. They will tell me most likely, hey, you know what? Your brake pads are worn down. We got to replace those, or your rotors are shot. We got to replace those too. Here's how much it costs and how much time it's going to take. I either agree or don't. What am I going to do? The car's already up and the wheels are off. Yeah, go ahead and fix it. They do so. I have brand new brakes and I go on my way. That is a classical problem that is solved by an expert and authority in brakes. Now, would I go to the auto mechanic if I had a different kind of technical problem? If I had a leaky pipe, would I go to the auto mechanic? Hopefully not. Hopefully I would know to call a plumber who likewise has skill, certification, experience in diagnosing and fixing leaky pipes. I'm sure you get the idea here. So next, we're going to look at a different kind of problem, which is an adaptive problem. And here I picked the example of how to survive a heart attack. Not the heart attack itself, but how to survive one. So most challenges that we face actually come bundled. There's a technical piece and there's an adaptive piece. And so I got to tease apart the technical from the adaptive here with a heart attack. There are technical parts to a heart attack. When I have a heart attack, and by the way, I did have one 6.5 years ago, so I can speak from experience. What happens? Generally a 911 call, get to the hospital as soon as possible, where a team of highly qualified medical specialists will perform a very complex and risky set of maneuvers to first diagnose and then treat the problem. First thing they need to do is find out, is it actually a heart attack or not? If it is, their goal is to keep the patient alive long enough so that they can fight another day. Now, their diagnosis might reveal that I need a new valve, or I need a pacemaker installed, or I need stents put in my arteries because they're blocked. I might need medications, or possibly a transplant or some combination thereof. They are the experts. They've seen thousands of heart attacks. They know what they look like. They know how to diagnose them. Why would I go to anybody else? So if the surgical procedure was successful, and obviously I'm sitting here talking to you, so it was, and the patient survives, here I am, is the problem solved? I would argue no. What is the problem exactly anyway? Sure, there were some technical aspects that required experts, but after performing this life-saving surgery, whose work is it to stay alive? Is it still the cardiologist and the nursing staff and the radiology department, et cetera, that's going to look into the heart? No, it's actually my work. I'm the stakeholder that needs to do the work, not the experts. So that's the big difference between technical and adaptive work. It's actually my work to do once I'm out of the hospital and out of danger. So let's go consider again the squeaky brake. So I'm going to go back here. Second. Oh, there we go, squeaky brakes. So let's consider if this customer comes in and gets the brakes fixed, and a month later comes back and says, guess what, I still got squeaky brakes. Whatever you did didn't fix it. So they're well under the warranty period, and let's assume they didn't drive 1 million miles in the month. So they still have warranty coverage. So the expert, the authority, the auto mechanic will do exactly the same thing they did before, remove the wheel, take a look and go, oh my gosh, your brake pad is worn down again. How did that happen? How could brake pads wear down in a month? Well, what might be the real problem if that were to actually occur? It could be several things. It could be a faulty part. Certainly possible. We don't live in a perfect world. The auto mechanic could have installed the part incorrectly that caused it to wear unevenly or wear down too fast. But let's assume we have a qualified auto mechanic who does high quality work and that the part is not the problem. So what is the problem? Well, if all we do is just diagnose the situation the same way we did every time, well, looks like your brake pads are worn, let's replace them again. That is doing technical work when we look at the problem. What would we expect to happen a month later? What we really should be asking is, what caused these brakes to wear out so quickly? We need to be asking different questions, not just using what we know and our know-how and how to do things, but to think differently. So what if we have a customer who's riding the brakes constantly, wearing them down at a rapid rate? Their foot is actually on the brake as they're driving. Unfortunately, we have a lot of those here in California, less so in the Midwest, but people drive crazy here. Well, that would cause the problem, but we will never find that out if all we do is diagnose the problem in the same way. That is to say, technical fixes won't solve adaptive issues. we'll just keep coming back month after month after month, getting the brakes repaired. No one's going to be happy in that situation, not the customer, certainly not the auto mechanic. So really, we have to change our thinking. We need further diagnosis. We need to be asking different kinds of questions, probing, and no amount of automotive expertise is going to solve it if the customer is riding the brakes. The onus is on the customer to change the behavior, not the auto mechanic. So watch out if you're dealing with problems and you put a solution into place where the problem reemerges. Like, oh, that fix didn't work. Well, let's try it again. And it reemerges. That's a real clue that you're not dealing with a technical problem. You're dealing with an adaptive one. That's a real strong signal to think differently. So misdiagnosing the problem, specifically an adaptive problem, and treating it as a technical one is probably the most common mistake that's made in adaptive challenge work. So what makes this so daunting? Well, to be honest, adaptive change requires loss, and it also requires us to get out of our comfort zone. So as a heart attack survivor, I can tell you the cardiologist, after they do the life-saving surgery and in the ICU, and the next morning or 2 mornings later, they always come, they sit on the edge of the bed and they say, we need to have a talk. Just you and I, we're going to sit here and talk. It's actually, they have a name for it in cardiology. It's called the sermon. And the cardiologists learn this in their training, how to talk to heart attack survivors about the work that is before them. And it generally goes like this. We saved your life. You know, we used our decades of skill and expertise and passion to apply the stents in my case, or put in a pacemaker, whatever it is, to save your life. But now our work is done and the work is now yours. So let's talk about what that work is. For a heart attack survivor, there are generally 4 things that are talked about. Change your diet, get more exercise. If you're a smoker, stop smoking, and get better work-life balance. They practice this sermon. So what does diet represent? Well, diet actually represents letting go and going without. That is loss. There are certain foods that I can't eat or can't eat as often. Other foods that I don't eat that I have to eat more of, that I don't like, that I'm going to have to get used to. That's a loss. Exercise. Well, exercise requires time. So I'm going to have to, I can't make more time in a day. What am I going to do? Am I just going to decide to sleep less? Well, no, I'm going to cause other kinds of health issues. So there are certain things that I'm going to have to stop doing, priorities that I'm going to have to jiggle, time that I'm going to have to allocate that I didn't before, if I don't want another heart attack. The next one I might not survive. If I'm a smoker, why might I be smoking? I'm not, so I can't speak with authority here. But I've heard that people smoke because it reduces their stress. It makes them more comfortable. To not smoke increases stress. Stress is the worst form of, well, it's the biggest problem for the heart. It causes the most problems. So here we're telling people to stop doing something that's going to cause stress. So we're going to have to figure out how to deal with stress, yet another loss. And of course, work-life balance. If I'm not working, if I'm not doing my 18 hours a day in tech, who am I if I'm not working? If I don't have my title, if I don't have my job, my role, that's an identity issue, a loss of self, all dealing with loss. That's what makes adaptive change so daunting. What are we going to give up? And in COVID-19, we're all experiencing loss of freedom. There, in certain areas of the country, certainly in California right now, mandates that you have to wear masks or behave in certain ways. Can't do this, must do that, etc. There's loss involved in all of this. So now what we're going to do is turn our attention to teams. So the first thing I want to show you is something that I learned at Google. I did 11 years at Google from 2005 to about 2016-ish. And towards the end of my tenure there at Google, Google came out with these 5 keys for what makes a successful team. Now, this is the end result, what I'm showing you. How Google got there was a very messy process. And I'm going to walk you through that a little bit here. It initially asked itself the question, what makes for a great manager? For a long time in its history, Google believed that that actually wasn't an important question to ask. It didn't matter who the manager was. It didn't factor in anything, just hire great engineers. These are just warm bodies that kind of move the pieces around the chessboard. They're a necessary evil, but they found out that that was actually inaccurate. If you're going to have a successful team, the manager, as Google found out, was very important. So asking the question was important. And that led to a publication of 10 behaviors of a great manager. And you can go look that up. Search in Google. It'll probably be the first thing that comes up. Or your favorite. If you're a Bing person or a DuckDuckGo, it'll also come up. So after those 10 behaviors of a great manager, Google then followed on with what makes teams more effective. And that ushered in this notion of psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is not a new thing. Google did not invent it, hardly. It had been around for decades, but it really had not been applied to teams. What Google did is showed that psychological safety was the foundational element of what made for a successful team. It was, out of all these keys that I'm listing here, the most important. And if we think about that, really shouldn't be a surprise. Embedded in our DNA is self-protection, fight or flight. We're all born with that intuition or that innate ability to protect ourselves when needed. We're not designed by nature to show vulnerability. That takes some practice. We're generally not risk takers when it could negatively influence us or the perceived notion of us. And what psychological safety does is it provides a way to be more vulnerable, a safe way to be more vulnerable, to show that vulnerability, to take risks, and have the trust in knowing that I'm not going to be negatively impacted. I'm not going to be put on a performance improvement plan if I show this vulnerability, or I take this risk and it doesn't work out. So the bottom line on a successful team is who is on the team matters less than how the team interacts. It's that how they structure their work, how they view their contributions, that is more important than, well, let's just get the 5 smartest guys in a room and have a team of 5. In fact, Google tried that and it didn't work. It was a miserable failure. So now I'm going to switch to the Kansas Leadership Center approach. And this is not an advertisement for Kansas Leadership Center. In fact, KLC did not invent this. KLC teaches a lot of this, but it actually comes out of some work by Marty Linsky and Ron Heifetz at Harvard University. But you can find it easily at the Kansas Leadership Center. It's why I put it here. And obviously I teach there from time to time, so I'm a big fan. It teaches leadership around 4 competencies, one of which I'm going to focus on here, which is energizing others. And to energize others, we have to engage unusual voices, and I'm going to go into detail on what that actually means. Suffice it for now to say that if all you do is you go and you find the people whom you're most comfortable with, who will agree with you, or who are easy to influence, your crowd, the ones who are going to give you the attaboys, oh, that's right, Geoff. Yeah, I agree. Great idea. Then I'm generally not going to be making progress on daunting challenges. I might feel good about myself because I got some people who I thought were going to agree with me to actually confirm my bias. But where did that actually get me on some daunting challenges? Probably nowhere. So what the KLC says to do is to do the opposite, to seek out those who have a vested interest in this challenge, same as us, but with whom we seldom converse. So we actually have to go out and find people that we don't talk to, who might not agree with the way we want to do things or see the world the way we see it. Those are uncomfortable conversations to be sure, but this is what's going to help us make progress on challenges. So in applying our best practices, what the KLC says to do is to engage these unusual voices. That, by the way, aligns perfectly with the goals of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I'm going to go through a case study on this and show you how that works in a Pandora example in a minute. So this case study, I'm going to talk about myself here for a while. The challenge was to build a software engineering infrastructure team from scratch. So I was told, Geoff, we've relieved you of your responsibilities and we want you to build a brand new team from scratch. We've given you this headcount, get it done as soon as possible. Well, okay, thank you for thinking that I can do this. Now, right away, I'm probably outside my area of competency. How many times in my career have I been allowed to build a software engineering team from scratch? Well, actually not zero, because I started a couple of companies, but not enough to consider myself an expert or an authority or competent in any way. So as we'll see, resist the urge to act instinctively. Even though I teach this stuff, I fell into the trap right away of going and finding my tribe, finding people who might agree with what should the team look like or who should be on the team. Exactly what I just told you not to do. Going against the psychological safety and 5 tenets of a successful team at Google that I not only knew about, but helped teach, I fell right into the trap. So if I can do it, be careful, anybody's going to fall into that trap. It takes a lot of work to not fall into that trap of just going and finding people who see the world as I do. The next thing to do is to change the rules of the game. So using Google's 5 key attributes as the blueprint for building the team, what I did is I did not make technical skill the primary focus for hiring. What I did instead is I focused on the macro result. How would this team function? And I kind of had to put my blind faith in whoever was going to be on this team would eventually have the technical skills, but I wasn't hiring for technical skills. Now, right away, I'm getting some people hot under the collar. What do you mean you're not going to hire for technical skills? That's what we do here at Pandora, especially in the engineering department. What in the world are you going to hire for if you're not going to hire for technical skills? So I'm pushing against the status quo, but this is exactly what's needed to make progress on these kind of adaptive challenges. So I needed some allies. I remember I said, don't do this work alone. It's dangerous, it's risky. You can be taken out quite easily by the system if all you do is put on the cape. So knowing that, I treated recruiting as an equal partner. Instead of using recruiting in the traditional way of, here's what I'm looking for, they need these kind of skills and this varying level of experience, and give me some resumes and I'll further push those down the line. And through this funnel, we'll get some diamonds out of that. That's the traditional way of hiring in tech, as you're probably all well aware. What I did is essentially threw up the chessboard and said, nope, we're going to do things differently here. Recruiting is an equal partner. You guys have a seat at the table. Not only that, your voice is as equal to mine. You've got veto power over these decisions. And they loved it. Now, I didn't know if they were going to love it or hate it because I was asking them to participate in a way that was quite different from how they were used to behaving. They're very good. They're experts at finding technical people for technical roles. They had never been asked, at least not at Pandora, to sit at the table and to help form a team. So I was challenging them outside their comfort zone. I was acting outside my own comfort zone. I was perturbing the entire system into hiring, building a team, finding a team in a way that had never been done before. Very, very risky. But I needed those allies. I knew I could not just do this alone. The next thing I discovered, and this was only because the first attempts at this didn't work, is that I needed to go fish in different ponds. So we started with what we knew. Go to LinkedIn and put in these certain kind of skills and see if we could find people that fit those roles, those skills, etc. Look at people who had attended conferences or had spoken at conferences on certain topics. We just couldn't do it. So I needed to find different types of candidates, not just the normal ones that had potential. They had passion and drive, but they weren't perfect. They were like that seconds piece of fruit. Really nothing wrong with it, just a little bit bruised around the edges. Tastes fine, not rotted, but not that perfect piece of fruit that everybody would like to buy and have. These kind of candidates were eager to take on new challenges to further their careers, if only somebody would give them a chance. And so where do we find those people? Well, guess what? They're at Pandora. They're in the QA department, writing tests, hoping someday somebody would let them code. Or they know how to code, but they've never been given the opportunity to design a big piece of software. So internal transfer candidates were actually ideal, but they didn't check all the technical skills. And that was the loss we had to assume when building this team. The next thing that we did, and we didn't get everybody from an internal transfer, but we were open to it, more open than normal, was to act experimentally. And remember, experimenting was a big part of what we do when we look at an adaptive challenge from an earlier slide. So how did I act experimentally? Well, at Pandora, believe it or not, and I know this is somewhat abnormal for the tech industry, did not have strategy meetings until I got there. Didn't believe in strategy meetings, a very tactical company. Why would we spend all day in a strategy meeting? What a waste of time. I said, well, I don't know what to call it, but we're going to call it a strategy meeting, and we're going to spend all day in this meeting. But instead of the typical strategy and vision and mission and so forth, and we're going to have this very well crafted paragraph that we're going to pat ourselves on the back, I had a very different way of running the strategy meeting. The strategy was not to figure out how to solve any technical problem. The strategy was actually how to figure out how to work together. That was the strategy. So we were going to all sit in a room and figure that out. And that required kind of getting up on the balcony and looking down on the team, looking down upon ourselves and focusing on that how of working together, not the what of working together. So I didn't have a big, long agenda. It was very minimal. It was mostly just to create the time and space for the team to talk to each other. What a concept. We're gonna create a day where we're going to do nothing but talk to each other, keep the laptops closed, actually keep them out of the room altogether, sit around, face each other and talk. They didn't know it, but what I was actually doing was closing the gap to get psychological safety increased on the team so they would trust each other. That was the strategy. Now, I didn't have to tell them that. They learned that. They didn't need a PhD in learning and leadership development, psychology, etc. They just went and did it. As an epilogue to this case study, I left the company about 18 months ago. The team is still together. Only one person left the team. since it originally got formed. It's one of the best and strongest teams I ever built. They are able to survive, obviously, without me. This really works. It is not easy to do. It's not easy to sell. It takes going against the grain of everything we basically have learned as engineers and doing things in a different way. But when faced with a daunting adaptive challenge, such as I was facing, it's exactly what was needed. So turning our attention now to how to do that in our times, I want to point you at two of my colleagues who are in Australia, Andrew Williams and Cameron Cran, who work together quite often. Last summer, they did research over 4 months, kind of at the, not the very beginning, but near the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And they came up with some findings through their research. And these are them boiled down. We have to be intentional. The purpose must be clear, not just to ourselves, but to everybody that we serve. We have to acknowledge the benefits and challenges of working from home. Pre-pandemic, basically every company I worked at kind of tolerated work from home, but only to a certain point. Okay, you can work from home maybe once every other Friday. It really wasn't condoned. It was tolerated. As long as you're getting your work done, sure, but we can't have you work from home all the time. Well, guess what? What did this pandemic teach us? It's possible with technology to actually work from home. And as some companies, not all, but some companies are finding out, it's actually more efficient and affordable to have people work from home. We're doing it. And if this pandemic had not come along, would we have ever gotten here? Probably not, or it would have taken much longer. You have to be very visible, very transparent. You can't be leading from behind all the time. You can't be the manager who's just there when needed. Have to be out in front at some point, which is risky, which requires vulnerability. Mistakes are going to be made, mistakes are going to be seen, and have to be extremely transparent so that the communication is heard not just once, but probably several times. Watch out for the Blur's Day syndrome. I suffer from this. I'm working from home all the time. Is today Tuesday? Right? That kind of thing. It feels like, I don't know, Monday, Wednesday, doesn't matter. It's Blur's Day. If you're leading a team or if you're in a position of authority, watch out for that. The people who are under your organization, in your organization, might be feeling that. And it's up to us to help make sure that they don't fall into that, oh my God, I don't even know what day it is. And connections and connecting matter greatly. So it requires more time to be making those connections, to show that we care about people, to find out more about them. Not just the, how you doing today? And then getting into the technical work of a one-on-one, but to maybe use, not every one-on-one, but some of them into things that aren't about work. What's really going on? And of course, that requires vulnerability and trust. Some people may not just open up on that first time. And it might also require reciprocation. Let me tell you what I'm going through. And people will reciprocate generally if they see that I'm being vulnerable myself. Lessons learned. So here I have quite a few. The first of which is the speed of innovation and the appetite for experimentation during this pandemic are quite inspiring. From where I sit, it really wasn't a surprise to see what's happening. Adaptation is certainly happening. It's happening right now through this Zoom webinar. A year and a half ago, this may not even been technically possible, yet here we are. A year and a half ago, maybe I would have flown out somewhere and done this live. Certainly not like this. So we are all adapting and learning how to do things that we weren't good at, weren't in our wheelhouse a mere 18 months ago. Those who are succeeding the most are leaning into the vulnerabilities, not just saying, Well, I'm going to play it safe. I'm afraid of this virus. I'm afraid of catching the virus. So I'm just going to cocoon until I can get the vaccine and there's herd immunity. That generally does not breed success. It might breed safety, might not catch the virus, but won't guarantee success. Those who are being successful are leaning heavily into their vulnerabilities. They're experimenting with the goal of learning. They know that this is an adaptive challenge dealing with this pandemic, not technical. Wearing a mask alone is not going to solve it. A vaccine alone is not going to solve it. There's learning that's required. Even if we do all those things perfectly, how is it to manage a team remotely versus that we were all in the office within earshot of each other? Requires learning. Coming to terms with the uncertainty of our time. Who knows if we're ever going to get out of this and what getting out of this is going to look like. And treating it as an opportunity, not a death sentence, not a punishment, not something to be avoided. And you can see the kind of companies that are being successful in that. They figure it out, and they don't need the government to tell them what to do. And they're all in. Nobody is playing it safe if they're successful. However, there is real loss. We need to absolutely be honest with ourselves and say that part of the lessons here is real loss. And I'm not talking about, I forget the number now, the 500,000 people in the United States and certainly more in the world who have perished as a result of the pandemic. Not to minimize that loss at all, quite the contrary, but there's certain kind of loss which is not visible. So let's talk about that. Here are some examples, and I don't purport that these are the ones and there aren't others. These are just somewhat off the top of my head. I'm sure you have more. Visible versus hidden loss from the pandemic. Unemployment. You don't have to be following the news too closely to know that unemployment is at record highs, or was a few months or 6 months ago. It may be getting better in your area, some better than others. Depending on the area, the residential real estate market is crashing. Not just home buying and selling, but also renting, with policies that have a moratorium on rent. Commercial properties, the occupancy rates are plummeting. The food service industry and the travel and hospitality industry are on life support. I am, amongst other things, a professionally trained chef. I don't do that for a living, but I do cook professionally, mostly for charity and so forth, and cook with other chefs. And I can tell you, based on the National Restaurant Association updated statistics, there's going to be over 100,000 restaurants that fail as a result of this pandemic, no matter what the government does or the community around them does. That's an enormous loss, but it's very, very visible. It's known, it's public. The airline and tourism industries are suffering, obviously. And small businesses are failing at alarming rates, while maybe some larger big box retailers are doing quite well. That is bad enough, certainly bad enough, but as this picture pretends, that's just the tip of the iceberg. What we're not talking about, what is not seen, what is equally important, if not more important, is all the hidden loss, the stuff under the waterline. Abusive and toxic relationships at home going unnoticed or undetected. Why? Kids aren't in school. People are quote unquote working from home. All you see here is, a little part of my home with, you can't see the quote unquote abuse that's going on to my right or to my left potentially, or who is suffering potentially as a result of being in tight quarters or limited bandwidth. Drug and alcohol use is on the rise. There's actually good data on this now. At the beginning of the pandemic, less so, but alcohol sales are very, very high. Drug use is known, at least in the area I'm in, to be quite high. And that is a problem that we aren't talking that much about. Higher rates of depression and suicide. This is a very uncomfortable topic to talk about. also very much on the rise. I would be shocked if there was someone on this webinar who doesn't have an acquaintance, a friend, a family member who hasn't experienced some kind of depression or, God forbid, some suicidal thoughts as a result of the pandemic. Let's not ignore it. Let's not pretend that it doesn't exist. It does. Financial ruin. There are some examples that have been put in the press, but I suspect a tremendous amount of financial ruin is either happening or awaits us as we come out of the pandemic. Again, let's not kid ourselves. Education is in disarray. And here I don't want to get too political with the teachers' unions versus the community versus whatever. There are plenty of examples of that. But do we really believe that the kids are getting the best education right now versus pre-pandemic? Probably not. Better than nothing. Maybe the best that we can do, but it's in tremendous disarray. We don't even agree in our communities here in California how to restart school. Should it be 1 day a week? Should it be in person, et cetera? Should teachers be there? How is it safe to do it? No one even agrees on that. How are we going to even agree on what to educate? Malnutrition. As a result of people being locked up in their homes, maybe less so where most of you are, but here in California, still locked down quite heavily. If you're not a professional chef like me, how are you supposed to cook for yourself when you've been used to going out to restaurants and having that freedom? It's probably the case that people aren't eating as well, and combined with the financial issues that people are having. Thank you, government, for the $1,400 or $600. How long is that going to last? What can people actually afford to buy? And all of that leading to higher levels of stress and anxiety. So what's below the waterline is quite important. How does this relate to you and your work? The metaphor here is, don't just focus on what's visible, what you can see, what's at the tip of the iceberg of your organization. Yes, don't ignore that, but don't focus just on that. Expect that there are hidden areas under the waterline that you and your organizations are experiencing. Maybe not you, but the organization. And you're going to have to spend time and energy to diagnose, unearth, and mitigate those issues. And if you do not probe, if you do not take the risk and get people to open up, you'll never know. And so leading with empathy is tremendously important to unearth what's under the waterline. Next, I want to talk about the difference between outputs and outcomes. Outputs are check the box activities. We did these things, we measured these things. Using this seminar as an example, there are about 40 some odd people here hailing from how many regions or states. That's an output versus an outcome. An outcome is whether what was done, no matter what was done, did it actually make a difference? Are people learning something? Are you learning something right now in this webinar? What attitudes, beliefs, skills, et cetera, were changed or improved as a result of what was done? And what was the impact on society, community, the organization? Management focuses on output and leadership focuses on outcomes. So if you want to lead, lead by focusing on outcomes, not just output. So I want to leave you with some questions to ponder before we open it up for Q&A. What behaviors do you need to model for your organizations when the road ahead is so uncertain? What do you need to begin letting go of so that you have capacity to have some leadership behaviors? And what dreams of yours are sitting on a shelf in your life in this pandemic? And what experiments can you run to give those dreams some oxygen that they deserve? So thank you for listening. I'm going to stop sharing here and we're going to go to question and answer.
Thank you so much, Geoff. I am going to get us started. We have a question in the Q&A, as I mentioned in the chat area. Go ahead and drop any questions that you may have for Geoff in there, and we will definitely address them. The first we have is from Pete, National Councilman. Maybe your rival as an Ohio State man.
Oh, no. But I got to give an honest answer. Okay.
I know. He says this goes back to when we were talking about teams.
Yeah.
And he said, how will the era of remote work change the productivity of teams? Will this improve or hamper teams? And what are the critical changes that must be made? Yeah,
so I think it's a double-edged sword here. I think in some cases it's going to improve, in some cases hamper. It's much more difficult to communicate amongst ourselves when we're remote. The signals aren't as strong. It's not as though I can walk down the hall and get a sense of things. And I can't be in Zoom all the time. And even if I'm in Zoom or Microsoft Teams, it doesn't matter, whatever the virtual conferencing is. I'm only getting a very short, small space of signal. So the answer is I actually have to work harder as an authority, as a manager, to get more signal. So my work is to get more out of people. That means communicating more, which takes more time, which means that productivity is likely going to suffer a bit in the short term. There's also the getting used to it part of remote work. But I also think it has tremendous opportunity. Companies like Google figured out a decade ago how to do remote work, now in offices, but remote nonetheless, and have that work out well. So not that big a stretch to take that kind of remote and make it even further into people's homes. Lots of technical challenges there, bandwidth, privacy. We all know the examples of the cat running across the front of the screen, or worse, that happen in these venues. I'm hoping you can't hear the dog screaming for his dinner right now, 2 doors away from me, but these things happen from home. And without that barrier between home and work, with home infringing on the work or intruding on the work, I think we have to have more grace for our people. They may have a kid who needs some help in school at the same time as the meeting is happening at work. That used to not be a problem because we weren't even there. The kid was in school, we were at work, and somebody else was helping with that. Where now we have to do both, and we can't be in 2 places at the same time. Just as some easy examples. So maybe go slower, understand it's going to take longer, reset expectations, distribute loss and disappointment amongst the organization, and understand you're not the only one in that boat. So probably going to be accepted, though not easy to do.
Thank you, Geoff. I have got one in the chat from Chris. He asks, what is the impact of using video to read a room during a team meeting? How would you convince those resistant on your team to utilizing that capability of video? Right.
So if you're not on video, if all you get is this lovely picture of me, it's there's far less signal to figure out what's going on with Geoff. But some people may not be comfortable with their video based on their quarters. They may be sharing a room. May not be able to have the privacy that they need to have the video on. Very, very different. So a tremendous negative impact from a signal standpoint from getting nonverbal cues about people that happen when they're not on video. What I would do as a manager is I would kind of take that one-on-one, I don't want to say offline because now everything's online, but in a private one-on-one, not in that meeting, after the meeting. And if there was someone who was chronically not being on video and causing issues with productivity or any kind of progress, I would want to root out what's going on there. Why are they not on video? Maybe there's some great reasons. I wouldn't want to assume that they have to be on video or make an edict that they be on video, especially if I, as a manager, can't show that it's absolutely necessary. And maybe there's some accommodation or compromise that can be made. Maybe there's some privacy that can be instilled. Meeting can happen in a different time. The person can be in a different place, etc. That's how I would handle it, though no easy answers.
Thank you. We have got one from Amy. She asks, at some point, we'll all be summoned back into an office space. And how do we get the team to feel like we're back when we've been used to really being on our own and in our own space and kind of figuring out how we work individually? How do we bring it back to a team environment?
Yeah, and so I'm going to actually expand your question because it's not that the question's bad, it's a good one, but it's actually a lot more complex than that. We have now people who've entered the workforce knowing nothing but work from home. They graduated college or were in the process of, they're at their first job and they know nothing except attending meetings online, never having been in an office. So that's what they know. And them going back to an office is a brand new experience. For us who've been in the workforce a while, yeah, it's like, oh, I'm back in my comfort zone. We should realize that for some people, it's going to be the exact opposite. That's what's going to be new to them. They're comfortable online and not comfortable in an office because they've never done it before. The exact opposite for us. There may be some who, in the pandemic, it's their first time ever doing things online. So a mishmash. Do I actually believe that we're going to be back full time and we're going to forget this little 2-year experiment, a Twilight Zone adventure? I actually don't. I think what we're learning is that there's value to being remote, avoiding the commute, being able to handle things at home that need to be handled, not having to make a difficult choice, like taking a sick day when one may not be needed. Maybe I just need an hour. So I think this is with us for a while. We're just going to have to go figure that out. I don't think that there is an answer there other than to understand we're going to have both. There's going to be the in-person and the remote. What I hope doesn't happen is what happened pre-pandemic in the early days of video conferencing, where the remote teams were just those people on the screen you could avoid and everybody else just talked amongst themselves around the table. That would be bad. I think the belonging part needs to include the people on the screen, that they are equals and we have to treat them that way, which may mean giving up some of our power, some of our control, letting the remote people have authority once in a while to run things so that the people in the office can understand what it means to be on that other end, experience that. I think that's healthy and good. Hope that answers it.
Thank you, Geoff. Just going to wait a couple of minutes. We don't have anything in the queue, so I'm just going to wait, see if we've got anything else that's lingering on any of our attendees' minds. And if not, we'll wrap up, but I will just want to give it a brief moment. All right, we look like we're all clear. Geoff, I know that you put your email. Oh, hold on, here we go. Tim said, I've never been in a situation where I have not met my boss before. How do I deal with that situation? Which is very unique and telling of the times that we're in. Yeah.
So let's look at from the other side. The boss is in the same position. So you're equals. I would approach that relationship by putting that out on the table. I've never been in this situation before. Have you? And there's some vulnerability. There's some honesty and some integrity. And let's talk about that. How can we have a productive relationship where we're not going to be in each other's physical presence hardly ever or maybe ever? It used to be easy, right? I would fly out to the the various cities where I had engineers at Google, and even at Pandora. I flew to Atlanta. That was easy. I could do it in person. But really, I need some new skills. I need to learn how to do what I did well in person virtually, and not assume I can just rely on that same old well-honed skill that I had of showing empathy and having good intuition and reading a room and getting all the signals. I need to work harder. So it's probably going to be more difficult for both of us. Takes more time, and got to be more open. I think people have to behave a little differently.
Thanks, Geoff. I think that we forget as more entry-level folks or folks that are reporting up, that we forget that our supervisors are people too. As I'm looking at Amy, who supervises me from across the country, that we're all people. We're just trying to figure it out and live every day and do the best that we can do.
Yeah, I'm coaching a former colleague of mine in my leadership coaching work, who just transferred jobs. And he's in exactly the situation that Tim is describing. Exactly. He'd never been before. He's getting coached on that. And going in, he thought, well, I'll just do what I know how to do in person. I'll just do it on video. And he's disavowed himself of that notion and understands he needs to build new muscle. Not forget everything he's learned, but understand that there's going to be new muscle on his end and on his boss's end. And since he's a manager, in his direct reports as well.
Great. This question here is about productivity and making the shift from working at home to going back into the office, even if we're going only into the office part-time. And how do we maintain that productivity when we're shifting environments?
And that's going to vary from company to company. First, I would want to say, get expectations very, very clear. Is there a different expectation when I'm working from home versus when I'm in the office? And make sure that what you think in your head and what the authorities think are aligned. And if not, let's get agreement, or at least let's get it out there that, hey, I'm unable to do what you ask when I'm at home, and I'm also unable for safety reasons at the moment to be in the office. So what are we going to do about that? That's an adaptive challenge for not only the person at home, but for the organization to figure out. I don't think there's an easy cut answer that works for everyone, other than really have some clear communication on that. Maybe the productivity is different. It looks different from home than it does in the office. And maybe we have to renegotiate what it means to have an OKR for a quarter. Maybe it needs to be finer grained or a little bit less.
Great. And maybe we'll close out on this one, Geoff. Can you talk to us a little bit about handling conflict and managing conflict and working through that when we aren't able to work through it face to face?
Sure. So my favorite saying is, if two people agree on everything, one isn't necessary. So I love conflict because I don't always have the right answer. I don't always know everything. In fact, I know I don't. When I was managing teams at Google and Pandora, I was famous for saying, I am the stupidest person on this team, and I know my ideas are going to be the worst, but I'm going to throw them out there anyway because it's going to get the conversation started. So not having agreement is a great thing. What it's doing is it's the start of a conversation so that we can all understand what we're facing. I think it's a 6, you think it's a 9, that classic meme. And we actually have to communicate with each other to say, hey, here's what I see, or what I'm thinking, or why I think this is the right way or the wrong way to do something. So opportunities for communication, opportunities to learn and understand. Don't come to a conversation like that thinking, I've got to convince them, or I've got to avoid the conflict because I don't want to raise the heat. Quite the contrary, raise the heat, but in a way that isn't making it about the person. We're not attacking anyone. We're getting the problem out there so that we can all understand it. And maybe sometimes I'm going to be proven right, and many times I'm going to be proven wrong. Doesn't matter to me as long as we figure it out. If me not being right was the key to better understanding the overall problem, because we never would have had the discussion anyway, then that's good. I am always leery of everybody nodding their heads and going, great idea, good. Yeah, let's just go forward with it. We don't even need this meeting anymore. We're all in agreement. I've never in my career, and I do mean that, never seen that work out. There's always a gotcha. Oh, we missed it. And therefore a total waste of time, or a large waste of time, and having to go redo something, had only somebody had a different opinion or questioned what it means that we're all in agreement. What are we not seeing? What are we blind to? What should we be asking that we're afraid to ask? That is what saves a lot of teams and makes teams more productive.
Great, thank you. All right, guys. So I know Geoff and friends might be out on the West Coast, but for some of us East Coasters, it might be getting a little late. Geoff, any closing remarks that you want to provide?
Yeah, carry forth and don't be fearful of conflict, of the virus, of productivity in organizations and different working conditions. Embrace it, learn, enjoy it. Big part of life, stories that we're going to tell 10, 20, 30 years from now. Maybe not 30 for me. But yeah, that would be the advice.
Great, thank you so much. Amy, any update that you would like to provide for a week of giving? Give you this platform for a moment.
Thanks. Just a super quick one. We are only 2 donors away from hitting 100 donors. So if one of you have been watching tonight and you enjoyed Geoff's program as we all did, please make a donation to support things like this. We're able to make these kind of programs possible with donations. So every bit helps. And if you can, we'd love for you to make a gift. That's my only plug tonight.
Now you only got one. Tim is donating $100.
Oh, well, Tim, thank you so much. I promise I'll see you when I come to the Twin Cities. Geoff, I would love just one last thing, I think. Okay. What is the book that you would recommend everyone to read that delves more into this topic of leadership and communicating and just being a good human, I guess?
Well, there's 2. There's one by Marty Linsky and Ron Heifetz called Leadership on the Line. It's a very practical book about adaptive leadership. There are tombs of adaptive leadership books that are very hard to read. Leadership on the Line has practical examples. The other one is Immunity to Change. And that's by Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy from Harvard. They're both retired now, I believe. Bob certainly is. And that is a book that delves into what keeps organizations stuck and what keeps us stuck. And it gets into competing commitments, hidden commitments, things that we tell ourselves that aren't true, testing things that we think are true through assumptions that we find aren't. It was for me very eye-opening.
Great,
thank you.
All right, guys. Well, we are going to wrap up tonight. I will shut off the recording. Again, Geoff, thank you so much for spending the evening with us. And we look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, to chat a little bit about TBHC and how they help support in making our undergraduate chapters stronger. So we're looking forward to seeing you then. For tonight, we will log off.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Geoff. Bye.
Bye now.